So first things first, Matt, how are you?
I'm very well. Yeah, just cruising, enjoying my time in Europe. It's been lovely.
It's very good to hear. What is your connection with Europe? Because you've been a lot to the Netherlands a lot. You do quite well, I think, in certain areas here.
Yeah.
Well, what is your connection with continental Europe?
I mean, I guess I moved to the UK. Not that that has anything to do with Europe anymore, but I moved over when I was 18, and for me, I was really keen to get out of Australia. And just play to a new audience and stuff, and work on my songwriting and all that jazz. And then when I released an EP that had Brother on it and a couple of other songs, we started to get a lot of interest from Scandinavian countries in particular, like Norway and Sweden and Denmark, and then like hilariously, the first time we came to Amsterdam, we played like a small show, and it sold out so fast. And we're like, "What's going on? Like maybe there's a bit of vibe here." And the next three shows we played with a Paradiso. So it's always been one of those places for me where I feel understood somewhat, even more so than being in Australia, which is really weird and nice, really nice. So.
But correct me if I'm wrong, because there have been several moments, I suppose. But was that trip to London kind of instrumental in you deciding to pursue music as well? And then I think later, around the debut album, there were some doubts as well to pursue continue with music. So, how have you overcome those moments? And you mentioned kind of liking the audience here in Europe. So
Yeah.
how did you kind of become more steadfast in this pursuit?
I think that's a loaded question, but I think there's always times where you feel like giving up, and music's a pretty tough, cutthroat, competitive
Right.
business, even though you're technically not really competing with anyone, but you're kind of competing with everyone, and it takes a lot of resilience and self-confidence to be like, no, it's okay. I know I have something of value to give people. Yeah, I think when I first came to the UK, that trip almost broke me.
Okay.
Yeah, in a lot of funny ways, but I was thankful or lucky enough to meet some of the guys from Communion Records before they'd even started I think they just started the label, which I don't know if you've heard of Communion Records.
Sure, yeah.
UK-based independent label. And they, at the end of quite a long trip when I was like totally out of money and hadn't really gotten much interest from anyone over what I was doing, they sort of last minute were like, you should come back and we'll make a record, and we think you're great. And it was just the right amount of encouragement I needed to keep rolling. But yeah, and sometimes you just have bad months, or and you just struggle with your energy levels, and you're like, what am I doing? Is this really worth it, or anything like that?
This is maybe a difficult question to answer then, but have you found an answer to that question? Like, why do I do it? Because as a songwriter, obviously you're growing, and then you keep releasing albums, and you're writing and developing your own craft. So what is it that kind of gets you going or keeps you going?
I think the studio time, the creative time, when you find a few sonic ingredients that really work, that's like a drug. That is an amazing thing to feel, and it's such a personal thing. There's no one else around. You just have this moment where you're like, that and that and that, and this thing feels so good to me, and I think that's the most exciting part of doing this, and it's the thing that I focus on now the most. Having to do interviews and all that stuff, it's very like confronting, and something that you kind of have to just be like, cool, like I will try and communicate myself to you as best as I can, but it's hard. It's those times where you're like, no, I love playing music, and I love making little weird new things up, and you never know what that could turn into. And I think I've seen a couple of times the result of something that really works, it can really touch another person.
Sure.
And that's a pretty good feeling. Like, I think that's what I constantly chase in this funny way, or why that's how I keep justifying me doing it, if you know.
And I've asked other songwriters and creative people this question, but is kind of the goal then, or the attempt, is that to write the perfect song, or is that too idealistic a way to
I think it's too idealistic. I think more so than ever there's no perfect anything, especially in music. I think the goal is to do what you personally feel like is right, devoid of anyone else's opinion, more so than ever, you know. Maybe that wasn't as true 10 years ago as it is now. You know, there was still probably a lot of like pleasing of the curators even 10 years ago. Whereas now there's very few curators at all. Everyone's their own curator. Everyone has their own personalized Spotify playlists and their own like personalized world in here. And no one really has any respect for like someone that's like, no, I know music and you will love this. You know, that's sort of, really disappearing, which is sad in a lot of ways, but also quite empowering for artists that, you know, care about their craft and doing something new and exciting that's for them. I think, I'll stop there.
And I did read in my research that you don't like kind of trying to answer questions about decision making, because sometimes it's just a gut feeling, or so I'll refrain from those type of questions. I'll try at least. But finally, before we head off into the album, what is the I can't find the word. The period before writing a new album for you like then? Because do you do a lot of prep work? How do you kind of get your mind right to? Because I believe during COVID you weren't as creative as.
Yeah, well, during COVID, I built a studio, which took about 3.5 months, which was great. It was a good break, and then I started working as a songwriter, and then that turned into me working as a producer. And I really enjoy producing records. It's really fun. And I think I learned so much about, you know, composition and instrumentation, engineering and mixing, and like, you know, production tricks. And I was sort of happy to be engrossed in that and not think about my own music for a little while, just because I wasn't quite, I mean, the tank wasn't full, if that makes any sense.
Sure.
I think if you force yourself to consistently find like subject matter and something meaningful for yourself to, you know, to do things with it, you know, it sometimes can be like, it's so unfruitful, like flogging a dead horse, such a bad expression. That's the only one that came in my mind.
No, but you need to live life a little bit. I hear that a lot. You need to experience life before you can kind of put yourself into those songs. Yeah, and
songwriting is this weird sacred space where you have to like, you know, dive into what you want and how you see things, how you feel about things. And you know, I think if you're constantly doing that, it is really draining, especially if you're doing it in a self, like analyzing oneself.
Sure.
When I'm doing it for other people, it's fine, because I'm like, what do you like? And let's talk about that. And I'm deflecting all of my stuff and happy to just almost method act or whatever as the musical person going, well, you know, you like, I know that these are the kind of genres that you like, and I'm going to drum in this genre and play in this, you know. So I find that really, really fun. And I think I was working up the courage to use all of what I'd learned as a producer for other people and make another record for myself way more informed than before. You know, when it came to making this record, I just set aside 6 weeks, and I was just happy to do the process that I do with everyone else and just try and be as open as possible as the artist this time. and I think I'd watched artists struggle and been like, I resonate with that, I struggle too, you know, and having those conversations and then being like, it's so unnecessary to be self-conscious in this time, which I was when I was making records in the past as well. So I think, yeah, it was like I was doing lots of field research or something in the years leading up to making a new record, and getting to flex all my musical stuff without it having consequences for my music, so to speak. Consequence is a bad word to use, but...
Well, I get what you're saying. You could try things out perhaps more and see what works for certain situations.
Exactly. And so, yeah, I got these 3 other guys together, and over 6 weeks, we just wrote every day.
Okay.
And some days the songs would sound great, and some days they wouldn't. And you know, every day was worth it. You know, even if the songs weren't great, you'd still learn things, and you might grab little bits from something and be like, oh well, you know, this totally didn't work, but that kind of works. It's like let's take that and put this here with another song. And, you know, just lots of kind of fun things. You know, that we, yeah.
Is there one strategy or maybe philosophy, maybe that's too too grandiose, but that you've kind of learned from this experience that you took away to the album? Is it maybe just something really technical, or just as simple as meditating in the morning or something like that?
I think that's interesting. Yeah, I think consistency in, you know, how you eat and sleep and things like that, they all start to play a factor when you're kind of in the studio every day, and you notice, you know, some days I'm here, some days I'm here.
Right.
And that definitely dictates the way the day is going to go, and the way that the music gets made, or what kind of music gets made, or how I want to sing, whatever. So you do start to zone in on the small details, like make sure I always have water with me. It's simple shit. Like there's no real secret to it. The other thing that I really was trying to do is to just feel happy and impress myself, like, and not by flexing or doing anything crazy, but just being like, I just really like the way this song sounds, you know, and I'm not going to change it for anyone. And it's nice to take that approach instead of considering too much what other people are going to enjoy, which I think I've done a lot of in the past, and try to ride that line. Whereas with this one, I'm just kind of like, no, it feels good, you know? We don't have to do any more work now. I'm not going to go neurotic and put 50 other instruments on it and in hopes that it's going to be this thing that it's not, you know?
But I can imagine that's a difficult thing to do, because especially if you... Well, as any kind of artist, you do put yourself out there for people to be judged, for your work to be judged by people. So... what was that learning process for you like then? Because you also did I don't want to get into it, but the Australian Idol thing and all that stuff, and that's a different way to approach music in this industry. So, what gave rise to this transformation for this album? And is it just simply growing older?
Yeah,
maybe
I think it's growing
being a
older.
father and having other priorities, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'd say parenthood definitely changes your perspective on other people. And you place less importance on their opinions. I think just straight out of the gate, as soon as you bring a life into the world, and you're like, fuck, I can't fuck this up. It also helps me, you know. I don't know. It's helped me playing shows too, being dad, just because I kind of see everyone as kids now, and it's it definitely decreases my anxiety in how important it is that I impress them. I think I'm at the point in my life where, you know, I just tell myself I know what I'm doing because I've done it long enough, and that's enough for me to do as good as I can, you know, and normally that's enough for everyone else to be happy. But yeah, I think the older you get, the more you just, I think you zero in on what you genuinely like, and you're okay to like it. It's almost like you need courage to admit that you like certain things and don't like certain things, which seems quite basic, but yeah.
No, but I think with a lot of those simple things, it's not always as easy to arrive at that point. Once you're there, it's kind of, well, why did I think differently before?
Yeah.
But it's I think for a lot of people, it's difficult to get there, and it takes time and stuff. So I'm very happy that you found that peace of mind in a way.
Thank you.
Now, everything's fine. When I read that title, I'm not a big internet person. I don't know if you are, but there's this meme of
the dog in the burning house.
Yes, that was the first thing that sprung to my mind. And the reason why I want to ask you about it, because you can perceive it in two different ways, I think. You can see it as, okay, I'm just putting my head in the sand and ignoring that the world is burning around me.
Yes.
The other one is, even though the world is burning around me, there's still a lot to be happy about. So where on that spectrum are you?
I think it's kind of like right in the middle of both of those things. I mean, there is a massive portion of modern living which is like, okay, there's a lot of intense things going on, you know, and you kind of just go, yeah, I mean, I'm still alive, so everything's fine. You're like, and yeah, the other side of it is, that's kind of the dog meme side of it, isn't it? What I just explained.
Well, yeah, but there's if you just judge it by that first panel, you can also go like, yes, the world is on fire, and there's a lot of problems that need addressing, but at the same time, there's also, I am okay.
Yes.
I mean, I can imagine you sitting home with your family on a Sunday morning or something and thinking, okay, no, this is actually pretty good.
Yes.
And relatively, I think the world is doing better than 50 years ago. So
yes. Let's hope.
Let's hope, yeah.
It's hard to gauge sometimes, but yeah, I think it's true. I hope it's true.
Well, yeah, that's well, the cynical man in me won't allow me to admit that, but I think the hopeful side of me is kind of going, well, at least there's not the same level of poverty as there was 50 years ago and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, no, I agree with that completely. It seems, I don't even know how to wrap that up. You summed it up way better than I could, but yeah.
No, but was that a thought? Because there are some mentions on the album of kind of enjoying the little things and being there, present in the moment and that kind of stuff.
I think enjoying the little things, like that whole concept, comes from recognizing how screwed up a lot of other stuff is, you know. That is that whole like, I'm acknowledging the chaos, and there's only so much I can really do about it or give energy to that chaos, you know. And then once you start to, you know, that becomes obvious, then you do start to zone in on what life is in its most simplest form in the present right now. And it does redirect your energy from anxious, depressed, you know, everything's fucked, to like, no, you know, there is still value, you know, to each life, and there's value to each moment. And even though you can be overwhelmed, you also can make the decision not to be, you know, and investigate further into some of the better parts of that moment, so to speak, you know, moment by moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, definitely. And in that respect, does and we talked about kind of the songwriting and creative process. So does that play a big role in that realization for you?
Definitely. Yeah. I would say it does. Big time. I mean, it's kind of like a funny self-awareness that, without being too hard on yourself. It's like giving yourself grace or something to just be who you are or something.
Right.
Yeah.
No, but it's
so basic.
No, but it makes sense. It definitely makes sense.
Yeah.
Because this ties in with what you mentioned earlier, to have the confidence to not be too worried about what other people might think, and just to make the music. And I mean, that's again a step closer to kind of true creativity or honest creativity.
Yeah, totally.
Let's not get into I wrote down a bunch of lyrics, but maybe it's better to focus on the musical side, because you mentioned the emphasis on developing those skills in the years before.
Yes.
So what was your approach from a production standpoint? Because there is quite some diversity on the record as well.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of made a rule with like instrumentation and arrangement that there could only be like 5 players in the room, so to speak. Even though I was sort of doing it all, it was, you know, if you can't communicate a piece of music with 5 elements, you know, drums and bass and maybe one synth guy, one piano guy and vocals or whatever, or guitar, or, you know, then surely the song's a piece of shit, you know. So it was kind of, you know, we put that to the test as much as we could, you know, every day. And, you know, most days would start with, you know, I'd have some chords, or I'd have a beat that I was keen to hit. And as soon as we got sort of 1 or 2 elements off the ground, it was just the feeling informed the rest of the decisions, you know, that was created from the fundamental things. And we just let that dictate the day, you know, without any real intentions to make some sort of statement or for some sort of message or for some sort of musical genre or whatever. We just were like, this is what it is, feels good, you know. And like someone would hit a melody, or, you know, there'd be a discussion sort of quite fluidly going around and round, and, you know, whatever made everyone go, oh, that's sick, you know, like, put it down, you know, let's go. So, you know, it was quite a free-flowing process, you know, not a lot of headbanging against the wall, kind of, this is what I want to accomplish and it's here and why can't I? It was more just like, this feels good, sweet, let's keep going, you know. Let's add this little thing. I was like, no, take that away. And I go, okay, it still feels good, you know.
So simply not overthinking things, probably.
Yeah. I mean, also, my whole family moved into the studio.
Okay.
So I had like a 5-year-old just like screaming at the studio door, like, Dad! So I think I only had like small windows of like, okay, like, I've sorted my son out with, you know, some food and stuff, and he's like watching a show on Netflix. I'm like, we've got 45 minutes, guys. Like, here comes bass guy. Like, let's go. And I, you know, I couldn't overthink anything really, because like I knew my time would be up any second, and like, you know, the screaming child would come in and want to hang out, which is so beautiful, but sometimes quite counterproductive.
Yeah, but I think it's good in a sense, because of again, kind of realigning priorities. All of a sudden you think, okay, because you can, as a producer, I'm not a producer, but I imagine you can tinker for hours on the most tedious stuff.
You can tinker for over 5 seconds of music for like 3 days, you know. And like sometimes my partner comes in and she's like, you have been listening to the same fucking thing for like 8 hours now. And I'm like, hey, I'm almost done. Like, she's like, what are you doing? I'm just finding this like synth patch, and then I'm just like messing with it. Just silly stuff, you know, and probably nothing is ever going to get used from it. But I mean, it's all lessons learned, you know.
But hearing this, and I think it's really great to hear, because, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, this is, I vaguely remember reading something where you threw out your debut album in its entirety. So obviously you set the bar high for yourself, but to find a certain balance in that is also very healthy, I think.
Yeah. I think I've always been pretty hard on myself, and that, you know, some things just don't turn out, and it's good to admit it. You know, that was a turning point for me, where I think, you know, we made a record that it wasn't good enough. I mean, some songs were good, but it wasn't enough to you know, pursue it as a project, even though we'd, you know, spent a fair bit of money trying to record it.
Sure.
But that was like a real turning point anyway, because after I guess failed miserably at trying to make that album, I told myself that I was gonna take more control for myself as a recording artist, and learn how to play the kit and the bass, and you know, how to put all these things into a piece of music that is a song, you know. So I'm kind of grateful that, you know, that whole thing was all messed up and didn't really work out, because it sort of forced me into, you know, taking the initiative and probably working a lot harder than I would have worked if it was all just sort of handed to me on this silver platter, and it, you know, it sounded great by some fluke because the producer was amazing, you know. So it was, those things you can always look back on in hindsight. If you overcome them, they're powerful things that have happened to you. You wouldn't change them for the world. So.
Yeah, I think as you mentioned and talked about it, it made you a more well-rounded musician as well.
Definitely, yeah. I definitely put the hours in after that. And like, I remember I rented out my friend's cold room. He runs this cafe in Sydney, and they rent this tiny apartment out there. They just keep their freezers in. And he was like, man, you can just have it, just pay us like $50. And I moved all my music gear in there, like bought a drum kit, like bought a couple of microphones, like bought a new laptop and started like, just recording myself. And it was funny. I used to put a big mattress up against the door, and like it would just fit in this funny corridor too. It was actually worked out really well. And I would call people. I'd be like, "Can you come into the building and just like, can you tell me if you can hear the drums?" People would be like, "Yeah, you can fucking hear the drums." I'm like, damn. But no, it was a good time, And I had lots of different muso friends come in, and we'd have jams, and they'd show me things, and I'd be so keen at that point to listen and learn about even just running Pro Tools and Logic, and how to engineer things, where to put a mic on a kit, where to put multiple mics on a kit, and why, and like what compression is, and like all these little things that like I needed to learn. It was the beginning of a really fun journey, actually. Yeah, and a journey I'm still very much on, and just 10 years down the track, I'm happy I've built my own studio, and it sounds great in there, and I love, even if I'm the producer that's not playing anything, I enjoy that so much. I love the engineering side of things. Okay. And yeah, I'm constantly on YouTube, like mixed with the masters, and like just learning, as many little tricks as I can. And sometimes I apply and sometimes I don't. And yeah, it's very fun, very in depth.
No, but it's good that continually trying to learn something new, or to evolve, to not stagnate. I think that's very, very, for anybody in any walk of life, it's very, very helpful, I think. Yeah,
I agree with that completely. And music, like most things, it runs deep, and it's always changing, And yeah, it's kind of this fun game, as much as it can be soul destroying, there are some really fun elements to it. Yeah.
The way I perceive it, and obviously again I'm not a musician, but the highs can be very high and the lows can also be very low. That's how I see it.
Very much so. That's what touring is especially like, which I think is why people think they see the highs and they're like, tour must be so fun. And it's like, no, I don't know if you could deal with the consistent swing of like...
For 2 hours a day is great, but then the rest of the time you're traveling and doing nothing.
Yeah, totally, yeah.
Last question then, because you kind of mentioned getting that excitement in the studio when something pops up, or you just is there one thing you can share that ended up on the album that was kind of like a moment like that, where it's kind of a surprise or an accident?
Yes, I can. There's one song on the record that's called Mainies. And I mean, I don't really play a lot of guitar anymore. It's probably the first instrument it's actually the first instrument I learned before I even learned how to sing. And I think I'm angry at myself that I never got to a level that's really good. I'm sort of just at a point where I'm like, yeah, I can get through songs, but I can't be like, and I think it made me frustrated at a certain point that I was never going to get that good. So I just put it down for many years and would almost hate having to play it, And I bought this nylon string. It was really nice. Everything sounded good on it. And I was sitting on my porch one night after a studio session, and just put my phone. Sometimes I'll like put my phone down and just hit record and just be like, let's just see what happens. I'm just not going to think and just play whatever. And I remember listening back to all these ideas that I put down on this nylon string. I was like, oh, all of that is like one song. They're all parts to a song. I was like, it's kind of cool. And I went to the studio the next day, and me and Chris were together, Chris Collins, who helped me make the record. We were just hanging, and we didn't really have anything great that day. We were sort of just trying little things, and no, not that. And then he was like, well, do you want to just go surfing? I was like, yeah, maybe, Then we would do that sometimes if we felt like, let's not like push this, We have some days where things just happen, and when they don't, it's best not to like, feel like you're being kicked in the guts. And just before I was like, yeah, let's go, I was like, I do have this thing that I was messing around with last night. He's like, yeah, okay. We put some mics in the studio. We found a tempo, and I was like, cool. Let me just riff something out. And from start to finish, the song came out. Like all the melodies, everything, half the lyrics, like it was crazy. And it was just one of those things where I was like, oh, I just felt like I was in a good moment, and every thing that I put out informed the next thing that was going to happen. And we finished it, like I finished, I stopped, you know, and Chris was just like, fuck man, that's pretty much a song. He's like, let's just write lyrics to it. And on the record, all the guitar parts that have no vocal in it is that moment of when I was just like, I'm just figuring this thing out. And then I had to overdub my voice and just the guitar for those sections, because I just couldn't get the feel from that very first pure moment of me just going like, this feels nice and that feels good and this should go here. And there was just something about the way also that guitar got lost in the flood. That was the other thing that happened. It got totally messed up. So I never could get the sound back, which was so frustrating. Yeah. I bought a new nylon and we like got it close to sounding like the other one that I had. But yeah, that was a complicated thing. But anyway, yeah, it was one of those just like magical moments where it's like everything just decided to align, you know, and I'm really proud of that one. It's a beautiful song, actually. It's one of my faves on the record, and probably just because it was so natural and no thought went into it almost at all. It was just pure. It just felt like that was right to do and play and sing at the same time. So, yeah.
No, I agree. It's one of my favorites as well. And hearing kind of the way it came about, it's interesting because there is this thought, which I've heard from artists more often, is you can force it and try to force it, and the best stuff tends to come out when you're just not thinking about it, when it's just throwaway almost.
Yes, so frustrating.
It's such an interesting thing about creativity.
Yeah.
But luckily you were able to tap into that a little bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was one of the reasons why I built the studio, is because I think I have a lot of those moments where it's like the first try is the one, you know. Things seem to fall into place better because I'm not thinking. And then as soon as I try and relearn it, it just gets worse and worse and worse. It's like, I wish we just recorded the first one. So it's good. I got the room all sorted and like, just, yeah. It's, if whatever's cut in there, that could be the final version, which is good. So, yeah.
Matt, may I thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me.
No worries. Thank you.